Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Margot, and today you're sitting on my side of the desk because I'll be teaching you how to draw figures and how to draw people. I hear a lot of people saying that they don't think they're very good at drawing because all they know how to draw are stick figures. And so if that's you, this video will be really helpful because the way that I was trained and the way that I prefer to draw human figures is that I always start with a stick figure first. And so the reason for that is that I always think that it's a lot more efficient and it's more methodical to block off the proportions and figure out the body position, the framing, as well as the position of your character or person on the page first. And then once you are happy with that stick figure, then it becomes a lot easier to fill in all the details. I see that a common mistake that a lot of artists make is that they will go in and start randomly doing different parts of the body. So they'll go into like the face, or they'll start shading the neck. And it's kind of like a random action as opposed to a very, very systematic way to do it. And so with this technique, it is very, very methodical. So what you do is you're basically stripping down the human figure to its most basic form so that you can figure out what the right proportions are. And then once you're happy with that, then everything else becomes a lot easier to execute. I kind of like to compare it to having a great recipe, where once you know all the ingredients and how to put them together, you can be sure that every single time you can execute that recipe very, very consistently. And that's what we want when we're drawing human bodies, is we want to be consistent and we want to know how the proportions are supposed to be so that it becomes somewhat second nature. So now that I've told you about it, why don't you come on over and let me show you how I do it. Today I'll be sketching on a sheet of Bristol vellum paper, and I'll be using a mechanical pencil to do my sketch. I tend to prefer mechanical pencils in general because I find I have more control with them, but a regular pencil will work just as well. So I like to work from the top to the bottom of my figure, starting with the head. And for the head, I like to create a circular or ball-like shape. I also like to add a line in the middle of that ball, which helps me visualize the symmetry of the face, so it will help determine which way the head is facing. So on either side of that middle line, you'll have the eyes of the figure, and down the middle of the line, there will be the nose and the mouth. Once you have that ball, you will extend that middle line down approximately the same distance as the distance between the middle and the bottom of the ball, and that's going to be your neck. And once you have that, you can start creating a horizontal line which is perpendicular to the line that you just drew, which will be the shoulders of your figure. I sometimes like to continue that middle line down a little bit lower because I find it helpful. Next, you'll create two diagonal lines to create basically what looks like an upside down triangle. This is going to be the chest area. And now's a pretty good time to talk about how you hold your pencil. I always suggest holding the pencil at the very end and not closer to the nib, because if you hold it closer to the end, it will give you more control and a more gestural quality to your drawing. Next up, you'll want to create another line which is parallel to the shoulders. And you'll basically be doing a rectangular or trapezoid-like shape that intersects with the triangle you just made. And this is going to be for the hips of your figure. So as you can see, this is very, very much a simple stacking of basic forms. And what you've created right now is the entire torso of your figure. So next up, we're going to be doing the limbs, so the legs and the arms. And I like to think of them as lines connected by balls for all the joints, like your elbows and your knees. So I'm going to find the midway point on the side of the rectangle I just drew and place a little ball there, which will be for the hip joint. I'll extend a line down approximately the same distance as the distance of the torso, and put another ball at the bottom of that line, which will be for the knee joint. So you see you've got one joint at the top for the hip and another one for the knee. After that, you can create another line for the next bone in your body, which is the tibia. And so we're kind of doing rough anatomy here, but this is really what it boils down to, is figuring out the structure first before you start filling out the details. So once you've reached the bottom of the legs, you have another ball joint there, which is going to be for the ankle. And usually when I'm just doing the sketch, I won't focus on the details. So for the feet, I'll just make these little oval shapes or circles. So moving on to the arms, I use very much the same formula as with the legs. So for the top of the arm, the distance is from the shoulder to approximately the hip. And that's where I create like a little ball again there for the elbow joint. And then I'll continue that down to another ball shape, which is going to be for the wrist. And so when you use this method, you'll realize that the only things that can move the arms around are the ball joints. So the sticks or the straight lines always stay straight, but they are operated by those ball shapes, which kind of will move them in different directions, if that makes sense. And really just practicing and having more experience with it will help you understand which way and which directions these joints move. So now it looks like we have completed our successful sketch of a figure. Now that you have a skeleton in place, it becomes really easy to start filling in the details like the waist or the hips, or even playing with the proportions. So whether your figure has a narrower waist or a wider waist. So this is the part where you can have fun with showing every person's individuality. So I'm going to start filling in the details for areas like the neck or even the shoulders. And essentially you're working around the parameters of what you already established in your skeleton. For the limbs in particular, I do have a method that I find very helpful, which is to think of them as inverted teardrop shapes. So these sort of elongated ovals that are kind of like upside down teardrops. And so I use the top of the thigh as the widest point and sort of taper off towards the knee. And that I repeat on the lower part of the leg as well. So as you can see, the top of the oval will overlap with the hips and then get narrower towards the knee. And it's always helpful to think of the widest part pointing towards the sky or towards the head of your figure. So you will continue doing the same thing down the lower part of the leg, again with the widest part of the oval or teardrop pointing towards the sky and then tapering off towards the ankle. And so we repeat the same thing with the arms. So it's exactly the same formula with the arms, widest part being at the shoulder and then tapering at the elbow, and then repeating the same thing again for the lower part of the arm. So as you can see, it's a very, very easy process once you have a very methodical way of doing it. And so once you have this technique, you can definitely take artistic liberties with it and exaggerate certain proportions or create more stylized figures, which is something that I really like to do in my work, since I'm not a very realistic style illustrator. So this is really just a framework for you to get started with, and then sky's the limit. You can really take it in whatever direction you want to. So I'm going to create another figure to the right of the one that we just made together. And I'm going to make her features a little bit more stylized. So I'm going to go with like a very long neck, shorter torso, for example, and what appears to be longer legs. So you'll see how that really takes it in a more whimsical, less realistic direction. I'll also create another one that is more full-bodied with different proportions. So I took the hips and I made them wider than the top triangle part of the torso, and larger sort of teardrop shapes for a more shapely figure, which is really beautiful as well. So there's so much room to play here with the proportions between all the different geometrical figures that we were stacking and how that creates different effects and body types. So now that you've seen how these stick figures turned into more stylized illustrations, let me show you in a time lapse how these come to life in my more whimsical gouache style. So to paint this, I'm using a combination of Winsor & Newton and Holbein gouache and my Escada brushes. To view an entire list of my gouache supplies, just click on the card above and it'll take you to another video where I discuss my favorite supplies for gouache painting. For many of you guys who follow me on Instagram, you'll have noticed that I love painting individuals of different colors, backgrounds, and ethnicities. So right here I've mixed paints that are a combination of peach, mocha, and chocolate for the skin tones. And I did the skin tones first and then added the wardrobe later, which is how I like to paint. But I'll go into detail about painting technique and how to tackle watercolor and gouache painting layer by layer in another video. And I'll just add a couple of basic facial features and we're done. So I hope this video was helpful and that you learned something new today. As with everything, practice makes perfect. And so the more you practice, the better and the more comfortable you'll be with the method and the more second nature it will become for you. So if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.